I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
The civilian population and the international community as a whole, you will appreciate, is controversial. It has always been linked to armed conflict. These crimes have to be committed as been an attack on the civilian population, irrespective of whether it was part of an armed conflict. Humanity is what is being protected, or perhaps a shared humanity, wherein all of us have a claim on the basis of our respect that we have and the right to a dignified existence. Now, I respectfully say that this is food for thought in the assertion by the ICTY, the appeal chamber, who observed as thus, quote, "Rules proscribing crimes against humanity address the offender's conduct not only towards the immediate victim but also towards the whole of humankind. Because of their heinous nature, they are an egregious group of offenses which needs to be addressed effectively." And it goes on to say that the conclusion that the ICCL protects international values and the provisions protecting these values characteristically international are insufficient to establish a strong internationalism simpliciter. We must ensure that a tribunal must act on behalf of the international community. We must ensure that these tribunals serve the values of the international community. Having said that, let me go back to Article 5 of the Rome Statute, which establishes the ICC, which states that crimes therein, amongst others, the crime against humanity, to be the most serious crime of concern to the international community as a whole. Although the statute itself does not designate the crime as a core crime, it was picked up by the literature that arose as the subject matter at the Rome Conference and has now come to be widely accepted. Now, this is a very fluid situation which really seriously needs to be addressed. It would therefore seem that the package of atrocity crimes adopted in 1998 will stand the test of time. The label given to crimes against humanity as being a core crime is without doubt used to refer to the perceived elevated status of this crime. It must be appreciated that it has been given a special standing in international jurisdiction and has been assigned a special standing in the context of nothing else but its moral abhorrence. In other words, it's a crime deemed to be the worst of crimes, or perhaps the most heinous of offenses. Now, in contrast, other crimes are deemed more appropriately prosecuted in domestic jurisdictions, in contrast to universal crimes, which have been deemed to be culturally specific. Now, the general attitude, Madam Chair, when it comes to understanding core crimes, is that we know what they are. We seem to tell ourselves that we know when we see it. For that reason, there is an overwhelming consensus, I say, about the core crimes of what is known as crimes against humanity. It must be therefore appreciated there are ambiguities in distinguishing core crimes from treaty crimes and must be distinguished from international criminal law in its strict sense, and therefore distinguished from crimes against humanity. So the position is that if one considers the historical narrative of international criminal law, a continuity from Nuremberg, so to speak, to Rome is consistently presented and traced through the developments from international military tribunals to the ICC. The ICC's President Philip Kirsch described the ICC as a direct descendant of the Nuremberg trials. It is worthy of note that often assumed to be naturally one of the most serious international crimes, that the core crime of offenses against humanity in fact has been structured to enjoy a special place in its status in the context compared to other serious crimes. As a result, it is important to appreciate, we say, that genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression enjoy a special place to the exclusion of other crimes for this special status. It is worth noting that there is a civilizational bias, a political economic bias, and an aesthetical bias in the designation of crimes against humanity as a core crime. It is now given that for a crime to be considered as a crime against humanity, it must be widespread or systematic attack direct against civilian population and with knowledge of the attack. These specific conditions must be satisfied to term crimes as crimes against humanity. However, we see many instances where certain groups have conveniently termed any act that go against their ideologies as crimes against humanity. Now, such a situation, in my view, is not to be encouraged and disrespects the very foundation of justice, which is absolute and is absolutely appalling that they make use of such serious terms very frivolously without even examining it if the accusation falls under the definition of the said term. Sri Lanka appreciates the work done in this connection by the International Law Commission for its contribution in the codification and development of international law. It pays a compliment to the International Law Commission on the completion of its work with the adoption of the draft articles on the prevention and punishment of crimes against humanity. Mr. President, the core crime of crimes against humanity that forms part of the international criminal law captures some of the greatest concerns about human misconduct. We are of the considered view that the core crime, in their predominant privileged position of being special, in the words of the academics, that we know when we see it, is perhaps much to be desired. And this is one area the International Law Commission should address. This public perception cannot be simply attributed to a sensationalist media, but regularly be invoked and be reinforced by international criminal tribunals. It's perhaps time, as one academic puts it, that the racialized, hypermasculine and violent portrayal of perpetrators of international crimes shifts the imagination of atrocity towards physical violence and away from other forms of violence, such as white-collar crime and drug money. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Sri Lanka. I now give